Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So, in our previous class, we were discussing the fact that the five kleshas which we discussed, they are the cause of suffering, or they are the cause of sorrow in the human mind. They are the cause, they are not sorrow themselves, though they are known as pain bearing obstructions or pain bearing vrittis. They are a form of vrittis, that is the mental waves, and they cause sorrow. They are the cause of sorrow, they are not sorrow themselves. That's why they are known as painful obstructions. So, we discussed what those five kleshas are, and now today we will just elaborate upon the five pain-bearing obstructions in their different states. Each of these pain-bearing obstructions, beginning with avidya, which is ignorance. Ignorance is a cause of suffering. Then we have egoism, asmita, that is also a cause of suffering. Then we have raga, attachment for things that we like, which apparently gives you joy or sukha because we are getting the things that we like. But the fact is that when these things are taken away from us, when we always don't get the things that we like, these very things cause us pain, the absence of which causes us pain. So also dvesha, these are things which we don't like, so naturally they cause pain right from the beginning. We try to avoid it. It is also known as dvesha. So dvesha is a klesha, which is a pain-bearing obstruction to a peaceful and happy life. So these are the cause of sorrows. Sorrow is a big issue in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra and also in Vedanta, because the Vedanta says the very reason why we should practice Vedanta, not just study Vedanta, is for the removal of sorrow. Atyantika dukkha nivrutti. It's a very important fact, because when people ask us, what do you mean by having God realization as the goal of life? God realization simply means, whatever be our conception of God, the idea is to get rid of suffering. That is why Buddha did not discuss too much, did not enter into discussion whether God exists or not. He said, just forget uh, just don't enter into polemics and try to find out logically or try to disprove logically that God exists. Whether he exists or not, one thing certainly exists in our life, and that is sorrow, and find out ways and means to remove sorrow. So that is the very logical and practical approach to yoga or to any Vedanta or any form of spirituality. Spirituality, if it doesn't remove our sorrows, the root cause of sorrows, because removing sorrow superficially is just a kind of patchwork. Whereas removing the root cause of sorrows, which are the kleshas, klishta vrittis, klishta means painful vrittis, vrittis which cause pain, directly or indirectly, they are the cause of pain. And then we finally, as I told you, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, and abhinivesha. These are the five generalizations which Patanjali has done to categorize all the types of sorrows that we suffer. None of the sorrows that we suffer, none of the type of sorrows that we suffer in life is outside of these categories. Somehow or the other, these are the five, the permutations and combinations of these kleshas give rise to sorrow. So again, to repeat, kleshas are not sorrow themselves, they are the cause of sorrow. Now, these kleshas exist not in one state, they exist in four different states. That is another thing to be remembered. That means there are five kleshas, and all five of them are exist in four different states. So that that makes it 20 kleshas. But they do not coexist at the same time. If, for example, certain kleshas are prasupta, that is dormant, they are in potential form, they are not manifest, they have not manifest as yet, because they are in the dormant state. So they don't cause, apparently they don't cause harm. But when the samskaras find the right kind of environment, they may start manifesting themselves. And then the problem comes, then the sorrow comes. So prasupta avastha simply means that it is the kleshas that have not begun. It can be any, it can be avidya, it can be asmita, it can be raga, dvesha and abhinivesha. Any of the 5 kleshas can be in this dormant state. So they have not begun to be effective in our life, or functional, you can say. These kleshas are there somewhere hidden. Whether you call it samskara or some other thing, it doesn't really matter, because Patanjali doesn't discuss that. He says these kleshas are in dormant state in most of the people. So why are they dormant? Because owing to the absence of proper stimulating forces. Unless the stimulation comes, they appear to be dormant. They don't cause much harm. So they are said to be dormant as we find it in childhood. So the example that is given is most of the samskaras are dormant in childhood. They don't manifest because they don't have the proper environment to fructify, to cause the sorrow. That's why child is apparently happy. He doesn't have any worry or anxiety or anything, because these kleshas have not started fructifying. Because of absence of stimulating agents, it is we that we create the atmosphere in such a way around the child, and disturb and arouse the kleshas which are there, which are hidden. Not that these will not come out, they will come out when there is a proper stimulating agent outside. They will definitely come out, because they can't be kept dormant for long. And the sooner we do it, sooner the child is exposed to this. The samskaras come out to the open, then we can deal with it and find remedies to counter it. So that is what Swamiji believes, that in childhood, the samskaras do not seem to exist. But suddenly the child grows to be either a good man or a wicked man. We do not know. And as children, they were all innocent, they were nice, they were happy, they were joyful, they had no anxiety. But when the same children grow up, when the dormant samskaras, the prasupta kleshas start manifesting themselves because they get a proper stimulating environment, good or bad. If the environment is good, the good samskaras will fructify. The environment is bad, then they will progressively, the bad kleshas will manifest. So in both the cases, when it ceases to be dormant, then the problem starts. So these prasupta avasthas you will find normally in children. So they appear not to have these kleshas, but when they grow up, you suddenly find that all the problems, all the kleshas which give rise to jealousy, anger, and all those things come up to the surface, and you wonder, how did this child, when I saw him 10 years ago, he was such a wonderful and sweet kid, and now see the state, after 10 years, he has worsened so much. So that is because the prasupta, the dormant kleshas have become active. Next we come to the tanu avastha, the attenuated state. So as you already it has been mentioned that the reason why we do tapasya, the reason why we do kriya yoga, which is tapas, swadhyaya, ishvara pranidhana, these 3 things are done just to reduce the effect of these kleshas, reduce it to a tanu avastha. Tanu means attenuated. Their effect becomes minimal. Now, how do we do it? Vyasa in his commentary says to this sutra that it is constantly having a opposite klesha. Pratipaksha bhavanam. Pratipaksha bhavanam means what? It is just a kind of resistance. It is a counter klesha. If there is fear, you make him fearless. You put the the opposite klesha, try to force it to suppress the other one, and then it gets cancer. So cultivation of opposite klesha is known as pratipaksha bhavanam. So we discussed what bhavanam is, that which is uh, that which gives rise to a klesha, that is bhavana. So when we have a opposite klesha, the cultivation of the opposite of each klesha is the mm, solution to our problem. So what is the pratipaksha of avidya? It is vidya, it is knowledge. If we are ignorant, knowledge will remove ignorance. Not more ignorance will not remove. So we have to get rid of avidya by vidya. So vidya means knowledge. Having proper access to knowledge helps in pratipakshana bhavana, is the cultivation of the opposite of each klesha. So pratipaksha of avidya is vidya, and that is samyak jnana, the complete knowledge, the highest knowledge, not the bits of knowledge that we gather. It is the highest. Samyak jnana means complete or true knowledge. That, and then discrimination between purusha and prakriti is the opposite of asmita. Now what do you mean by that? That is what Vyasa says. Discrimination between purusha and prakriti. The more you identify with the prakriti, the more strong your ego is, because ego is a product of the grossness that we see around us. So prakriti has a tendency to increase your asmita. So when you distinguish Purusha and Prakriti, is the opposite, I mean the discrimination, the Viveka, which says no, don't fall a prey to this ego. Ego which has its roots in, if we don't discriminate properly or separate Purusha and Prakriti, they get mixed up. The consciousness, the I consciousness, is a product of Prakriti coming in contact with the Purusha. The Purusha, the pure consciousness, is not attracted. There is no raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, no klesha for the pure Purusha. But when it merges with Prakriti, it degrades, as it were, into asmita. So the attitude of neutrality which we have to follow is the pratipaksha of raga and dvesha. Be neutral. Don't be too much attached to anything, or don't be hating anything. In other words, strong likes and dislikes have to be balanced. I mean, don't have strong likes, don't have strong dislikes. There, maintain a kind of madhyastham. That is what Patanjali says, or some kind of neutrality. Giving up the, then finally we come to the giving up the idea of permanence. That is, anubandha buddhi nivrutti is the opposite of abhinivesha. So the giving up the idea of permanence, that knowing fully well that the idea of permanence in the perishable. So if we think the body is permanent, then the fear, the abhinivesha comes, the fear of death comes. Just because we know or we imagine that our body is going to be eternal, which is not true. So if you convince that anyway this is temporary, so let me not run after it. But if we run after the temporary, the idea of permanence, and associate it with everything that is temporary, then we suffer. Then the abhinivesha comes. We think the body will last, will be everlasting, when it is not. It is only the Purusha that is immortal. But trying to consider the body as immortal, the wealth that we generate is immortal, the property that we have, the other forms of wealth and possessions are eternal. That is the opposite of abhinivesha. If we consider them to be, give up the idea that they are permanent, just take them as transitory things, that is the opposite. That is the pratipaksha bhavana of abhinivesha, which worries us. So if you want to remove worries, if you want to remove anxieties, then give up the idea of permanence associated with the temporary objects. The moment you do it, the moment you recognize Prakriti as temporary, then it releases its hold over our minds. Then we don't run after we engage with them knowing fully well they are temporary. There's nothing wrong in engaging with Prakriti. In fact, we can't help it. We are all bound by Prakriti. In some way or the other, we are totally dependent on Prakriti. But if we consider it to be separate from Purusha, that Viyoga, yoga actually has been defined as the Viyoga, the separation of the eternal and the non-eternal. And if we do that, that Pratipaksha Bhavana, the opposite of giving up the idea of permanence, is the opposite of Abhinivesha. So we can get rid of all the fears because we hold on to temporary things as permanent, and that is why we have fear of losing it. We have fear of losing something which we think is permanent, which actually is temporary. So it is wealth or health or the body, anything gross. We know, the heart of our hearts, we know these things undergo transformation. Nothing stays, nothing is permanent in this life. And in spite of seeing it on a daily basis, on a minute by minute basis, on a second by second basis, we keep on forgetting it. And that idea of permanence again comes. And we mistake the impermanent for the permanent, and that causes fear. So to remove it, we have to cultivate the opposite view. Discriminate between real and unreal. That is known as Viveka. Sri Ramakrishna used to tell it in a beautiful way. It is the discrimination, Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka. That is the Sanskrit used in Vedanta. So things that are Nitya, which is Purusha, which is pure consciousness, if we think that is permanent, it is okay. But if we think the Prakriti is permanent, so Anubandha Buddhi Nivrutti, so that has to be given up. Anubandha means that bondage, that one which causes bondage. So that buddhi which makes us grasp at the temporary as permanent has to be given up. So Patanjali himself in the 34th and 35th verses, which will come, now we are just in the 4th verse, we will discuss it at that time. There we will find what exactly this Pratipaksha Bhavana is. Now we have just introduced this topic. So it is a kind of Viveka or a discrimination which serves as a complementary thing, or supplementary to the Kriya Yoga. We do Swadhyaya, study of our own self. We do Ishvara Pranidhana, and we do Tapasya, some kind of mental restraint. All these three things are good. But along with that, a little Viveka also should be there. A discrimination to know what is Kriya Yoga, what is Sadhana, what is Tapasya, what is Tapas. So all this to understand, you have to have that keen discrimination to know what is real and what is unreal. From the standpoint, as I told you, from the standpoint of modern psychology, you may ask what is its utility of Pratipaksha Bhavana, how does it work? So it may be regarded as a word is there in Freudian psychology, or all the later psychologies also use this word. It is known as sublimation. What do you mean by making something sublime? How do you bring sublimation in our life? How to make it sublime? How to make it more noble? Sublimation means nobility. So the process of directing the energies from lower, that is our lower impulses, to higher creative channels is known as sublimation. We have crude desires, we have lower impulses which we share with animals. For some time, if we try to restrict that and channelize that energy which we have to succumb to the lower impulses to some higher creative channels, for example, energy of raga, the raga, that is attachment to all the silly things of the world, can be sublimated, and it can take a higher form as an intense love or aspiration for God. Now it is also attachment, but you are not attaching to something silly or something lowly or something. The lower impulses are totally controlled, and we attach our mind. Since you can't give up raga, you have to like something, then like God. So love or intense love or aspiration, which we have for money, for different things of the world, as Sri Ramakrishna so nicely said, men weep for property, weep for their wives, weep for their children, weep for money and worldly prosperity. But how many people weep for God? That is what he meant by this Pratipaksha Bhavana. Try to direct your raga, dvesha, all these kleshas can be pain bearing, will be pain bearing if you direct it to lower things. But if you direct it to higher things, then the kleshas become aklishta. Now they are klishta because they are painful. Aklishta means they will become painless. It gives you joy. The same raga, if it is focused on something lower, then it gives you pain. If it is focused on something higher, a higher channel, then the same raga gives you peace and joy. So that is how the energy of desha can be sublimated into the determination, some kind of determination, which is known as manyu. Manyu is a word which is Upanishads use. That kind of tenacity, a kind of determination. So dvesha means what? You are determined to avoid evil things. You are desperate. You are trying to avoid. So it finally results in some kind of hatred for the things that you don't like. If you are really stubborn, or if you really want to use that negative energy of dvesha, then direct it towards the Lord. And to overcome all obstacles, just say that how can these obstacles, how can this ignorance, raga and abhinivesha come to me? Assert it. That dvesha helps you. The force generated by hatred for things that you don't like, if you channelize it in a proper way, it can come to your help. So, and or into vairagya towards the object of senses. You hate all the objects of senses. The same hatred you have for things you don't like, that can be transmuted. The energy of fear can be sublimated into surrender, self-surrender to God. It is known as Sharanagati. So since you can't get rid of fear, then you say, now I'll become fearless. How? By surrendering everything to the Lord. If the Lord is my guide, if the Lord is my support, it gives a tremendous kind of fearlessness. You think, oh, I am the child. Just as a child, when it is full of fear, it just looks here and there. The moment it sees his mother, the child knows that now I am safe. Then it will lose all kinds of fear. It becomes fearless in the company of the parents. So similarly, if we surrender everything to God and think and give all our responsibility, it is known in Sanskrit as Sharanagati. You surrender everything to the Lord. So that is how you sublimate the energy of fear. The energy or abhinivesha can be sublimated into Ishvara Pranidhana, or self-surrender to God. So now another psychological definition of Pratipaksha Bhavana, creating of opposite emotion or opposite klesha to control it. Now it can always also mean something very significant. We have to understand this. It is changing the connection between memories and impulses. Now what do we mean by this? In two ways it can be done. For example, your memory is based on certain mental pictures, and based on those mental pictures the impulses come. Take a simple example. You were not aware of smoking till you suddenly see an advertisement, or maybe you see a box of cigarettes lying somewhere. You were not even thinking of smoking, but the moment you saw it, the old memory of the smoking, the impulse came, and then you just went, took a cigarette and lighted it, because it has already become a memory. So many times if we repeat something, it becomes a smriti or a memory. So that connection has to be cut. No matter what I see, I'll not succumb to the impulses to smoke. I may see every day, I may see these advertisements of cigarettes and other things. But that will not inspire me, that connection between memories which induce you, which gives you the impulse, has to be cut somewhere. That is one way Pratipaksha does. Pratipaksha Bhavana means trying to cut. How will you cut the impulses, the connection between memories and impulses? In two ways it can be done. First, the mental picture is replaced with another. You simply replace the mental picture. Suppose you are looking at a picture of a lamb, and always you get a fear that the lamb will be killed by the lion. Now simply replace that and replace it with the lion itself. Then you feel strong. So that fear impulse has gone. So one mental picture is replaced with another mental picture. That is one way of doing it. Or else the second way of doing Pratipaksha Bhavana is picture remains the same, but the bad impulse is replaced with a good impulse. For example, in the former, the picture of a uh, some woman troubling your mind, you just replace it with the Holy Mother, some divine mother, or your own mother. So that bad impulse which we get is replaced by changing the object, or maybe changing the emotion. The impression of the woman is there, the image of a woman is there, but you change the impulse changes as soon as you change the direction of your memories, or the impulses. The impulses can be changed. They may be replaced by the mental picture of one's own mother, or the Holy Mother, or some divine woman. So the moment you try to see that is what Sri Ramakrishna did. When he met ordinary women, he managed to see the divine mother in them. That is what Swami Sarvasthananda asked him. He said, please bless me that whenever I come across women, so that I don't degrade myself, I just try to see the image of the divine mother in them. So Sri Ramakrishna blessed him. That is known as Shakti Puja. When you worship the divine mother in and through the ordinary women, then it becomes Shakti Puja in the true sense. So this automatically either replace the picture, do not see that picture of the cigarette or whatever object gives rise to impulse, that is Pratipaksha Bhavana, or change the emotion itself. The feeling of, suppose you have a hatred, somebody has hatred, you have a hatred, then you have to struggle to create an opposite impulse, or the feeling of forgiveness or compassion. So when Jesus said, please forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. So he even blessed the people who crucified him. How did he bless it? By creating the Pratipaksha Bhavana, the opposite emotion. Instead of hatred towards such person, you create a strong feeling of compassion or forgiveness, and that helps to control the klesha. This method can, but this is just a temporary measure. So we have two means of reducing the effect of the kleshas, or making them into tanu avastha. Prasupta avastha is something which we inherit from childhood. It is there in the childhood. As soon as we get the circumstances change, when the child grows up, those samskaras come out. That is very little we can do. They will come out sooner or later, they will come out. But in tanu avastha, if you have reduced the impulses to such an extent, then we can say that we are comparatively safe. So the third way of completely reducing the impact, tanu avastha, is the detachment of the will. This is something very important. Pictures, mental pictures, emotions, and all the things, disturbing things around us, they can affect us. They can cause impulses in us only if the will supports it. If the will is detached, then you will say, so how do you detach a will? Take the classic example of smoking a cigarette. You see the image, the impulse also has come that you should smoke it. Now use your willpower to detach. Say no, no matter how many times I see the cigarette, I am not going to smoke it. So that sankalpa, that willpower, if the moment it is detached, said let it be there, I am not connected to that uh, object at all. You show me the picture 100 times of the cigarette, I am not going to smoke. That means your will has been strengthened. It is the will that makes you smoke, and it is the will that again prevents you from smoking. So if the will is detached from the object, then you don't smoke. Then the klesha will disappear, the impulse will disappear. So if you practice this detachment, that is why anasakti, abhyasa and vairagya. We practice japa and at the same time have vairagya, detachment. Both have to go together. This detachment is so important that Mahatma Gandhi even called his commentary on the Gita as Anasakti Yoga. So the whole of Gita, the essence of Gita is to show how man can practice detachment. Because of this detachment, Krishna was not attached to anything in the world. He was living in the world. He had not retired to the forest, giving up the world. He was very much a householder living in the world. But he was so much detached, perhaps more detached than a monk would do. He was more detached than a monk. So that detachment is nothing but detachment of the will and not allowing the memories, the smritis, to attach the will to that memory. If you attach, then what happens? Immediately you feel like smoking. You go and take up a cigarette and smoke. So every time you smoke, the will becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. So our idea is to make it stronger by denying, by saying that no, that is what pratipaksha bhavana is. To the third method is more effective because no matter, you can't avoid seeing certain things. When you work in the world, there are many distractions. You can't avoid that. You can't say that I'll not close my eyes and not see the picture of a cigarette at all. Somehow or the other, some ad billboard or something will be there where you will see these images. So you can't isolate yourself or you can't run away from that. You will have to encounter these images. But if you detach or if you don't attach the willpower to it, then you are safe. Then the pratipaksha bhavana works, the opposite emotion, creating of the opposite emotion works. And not only that, when you detach the will, it becomes more effective and you don't fall a prey to the kleshas, you don't fall a prey to the impulses. So, this practice of detachment becomes effective. Practice of vairagya and vairagya have to go together. You just go on practicing detachment. You don't know why. Oh, I will not do this. I will not do this. I will detach. I will detach. But what for? Detachment is good, but detachment has to be complemented by something else, and that is known as tapah swadhyaya, that is kriya yoga. Kriya yoga is a positive way, detachment is a negative way to attain the same goal. So we want both the approaches. A negative approach which prevents us from succumbing to the memories and succumbing to our lower impulses by pratipaksha bhavana, and then there is tapas swadhyaya, self study, and ishvara pranidhana, by doing all works with the spirit of worship. If we do that, then you will find that detachment becomes effective. And this abhyasa and vairagya together helps in the tanukarana, tanutva of the kleshas. They can be easily, effectively and quickly. But at the same time, Ishvara Pranidhana, with which surrender to God, gives us a strange energy to control this will, develop this willpower, and that is known as kripa or divine grace. So the divine grace, if it is there, if we focus enough on our Ishta, if we go and practice sadhana, practice Kriya Yoga, Ishvara Pranidhana becomes a reality and Lord really showers His grace. So this usually happens when you, in response to intense and persistent prayer. It is not so easy to get divine grace. You have to go on and go on praying to the Lord, trying persistently praying gives you that power, that infusion of power to practice tapasya, swadhyaya and Ishwar pranidhana, the kriya yoga, in such a way that your will gets strengthened. To reduce the effect of tanut of this klesha, of all the 5 kleshas, you require tremendous strength, and that tremendous strength comes from divine grace, and that divine grace comes by intense and persistent prayer. So that is how Ishvara Pranidhana. Now, what is the nature of this Tanu Avastha? What does it do? So, whatever method we adopt to counter these kleshas, counter these pain-bearing or sorrow-causing obstructions, the method, the whatever be the method, apart the tanutva or the reduction of the effect of kleshas is a very, very important step on the spiritual path. It is a state where a yogi, that is one who is aspiring to be a yogi, a spiritual aspirant, is expected to remain till he attains the highest illumination. He should not go beyond that. He should reduce his samskaras or his kleshas to tanu avastha, then he is safe. Not that he has reached the final goal till he gets spiritual illumination, but at least it prevents him from going further down. It is more or less a permanent state, a mental state of deep peace and calm, which results from weakening of the primordial creative impulse, which is known as kama. So when Sri Ramakrishna says kama kanchana tyak karo, that is renounce kama, kamini and kanchan. Kama is the better word. So kama here means a kind of intense creative desire to acquire gross things. What do you mean by kama? You aspire to get things, you don't possess it, you think that is a permanent source of joy, and you run after it and you get it. That is known as kama. Kama doesn't give us permanent bliss. It can never. So that is why the words which we use, Purna Kama, one whose desires are fulfilled, he alone can attain peace. So that is what is told here, that raga is only an outer manifestation of this kama. When you say raga, attachment to certain things, it is just nothing but kama, the primordial creative impulse in all of us. Everybody wants to create. There's nothing wrong. He wants to create wealth, he wants to create children, he wants to create a family, he wants to create many, many, many things. Some people want to create great work of art or great scientific discovery they want to create. So all this creative urge, basic creative urge, cannot be removed. They can only be sublimated. They can be directed to higher and higher channels. The kama or desire to enjoy lower objects or lower impulses, that can be transmuted into higher impulse or higher objectives. Raga remains the same, the intense attachment to become a scientist, to become a great painter. The raga has to be there, but it has to be channelized in a proper way. The person who has attained to this tanutva state, where all his kleshas have been reduced to a bare minimum, then he feels he is inwardly free. When you talk of freedom, how do you judge? That inner freedom comes when all your kleshas do not lead to sorrow. That sorrow becomes less and less as you get tanutva of the kleshas. The more we have this tanutva, the more minute they become, the more ineffective they become, the more peace you find. Because there is a ocean or a pitcher of peace, as Holy Mother used to say. Our hearts, the true Satchidananda, or the true Ishta who is residing, he is, as it were, is a pitcher of nectar of bliss. But unfortunately, we have covered it. We are running after lesser, we are running after water when the nectar is available. But because it is encased in a pot, it is covered by many of your gross desires or gross kama, as they say. Kama means the desire, gross desires. So because it is covered, you cannot discover the real joy or real peace, and nor do we enjoy the real moral freedom. It is known as moral freedom. When you do things rightly, when you are not guilty of doing anything wrong, if that guilt feeling is there, you feel sorrow, the kleshas come back. That guilt is, it eats into our vitals, because we have, but once we repent, once we try to forgive and mainly to forget also, if we do that, then these kleshas become, go into a reduced into, they are reduced into a tanutva state, a very fine state. And the more tanu it becomes, the more inwardly it becomes liberated. So that moral freedom is the first precursor to the real spiritual freedom. Spiritual freedom comes much later. Now we are dealing only with the kleshas. It is enough if we handle these kleshas properly, leave alone the higher states of dhyana and samadhi. There these kleshas are absolute requirement to even think of higher spiritual experiences, is the removal of these kleshas, or at least the tanutva, the reduction of the force of the kleshas. And that is the goal of yoga, because at that time your impulses have become so, the kleshas have become so tanu, so minute, that unless there is a very strong stimulus from outside, you will not succumb to it. So that is why, that is the one test of seeing if the tanutva is there. So one of the tests, how do you know that a person's tanutva has been successful, he has been able to reduce the impact of his kleshas? One of the indirect methods, a very effective but indirect method, is to analyze the dream life. Such people get good dreams very often. No, there are exceptions. Even the best of people get bad dreams. So that doesn't mean, but the proportion of good dreams increase. That is one way. There are this, because the klesha is less, it has become tanu. It is the kleshas, it is the pain-bearing obstructions that cause bad dreams or nightmares, because they are suppressed during the waking state. So they find out an outlet when you are in dream, and then that makes us dream. We say we had a nightmare, we have nightmarish experiences. That is because our clay not reduced to the tanu avastha. Once we do it, our dream life, one of the first signs is that your impulses have been reduced to a tanu state, that tanu karana has happened. One of the signs is that your dream experience becomes better and better, or you dream less. Now when these tanutva can suddenly, I mean, the kleshas which you have reduced with great difficulty, sometimes you find in some cases they suddenly burst. You feel, I had controlled all my desires. Now suddenly what has happened? And I have fallen, because there they say one has to be very, very careful. The yogi has to be careful. Once he reduces the effect of his sorrows, he should not expose them again and again. However safe he may be, he should not expose, he should not become careless. So how to prevent? So Patanjali introduces another state which is known as Dagdha Bija Avastha, which is not there in these four states. The four states, as we described, the Tanu Avastha, the Prasupta, which is dormant in childhood, the Tanu Avastha, which is sublimation of all our pain-bearing obstructions. After that, we have one state which Patanjali adds, is the Dagdha Bija. Dagdha Bija means a burnt seed. So they take place only when the higher light of Buddhi or the fire of Buddhi burns all these kleshas, and they go to an irreversible state. All the samskaras are burnt. There is only peace and joy and bliss. That is the result of Vairagya. So these kleshas can be destroyed. Swami Vivekananda once said, everything in this world is fraught with fear. Everything. Vairagya or detachment alone is fearlessness. So he, in his famous poem, he shows how people tremble and fear. The wife fears the husband fears the wife, We fear society. Society also fears certain terrible people. Then we fear the loss of money. We fear loss of name, loss of fame. There are 1 million types of fears that we encounter every day. So, if we want to get rid of that fear irreversibly, then even Tanukarana will not help. You have to simply burn the kleshas. Dagda bija means you burn the seed. So it has no chance of sprouting up again. Otherwise, a dry seed also, after hundreds of years, if you plant it and it gets the right environment, it will start sprouting. But the samskaras can be totally destroyed by burning them. Once you take up all the seeds and burn them, then they don't have the capacity to grow. So then we have two more states which we will discuss in the next class: Vichinna Avastha and the Udara Avastha. Udara means freely expressed. That is the worst, because Udara, when all the kleshas become Udara, then you succumb to so many impulses which are created. So we will discuss the Vichinna Avastha, which means the repress or the suppressed state. That is another way. If you can't reduce it, at least temporarily slap it and reduce or maybe repress it. Don't allow these samskaras or kleshas free expression, then there will be problem. So before even we reach the last avastha, udara, freely expressing, when you know that your kleshas have been reduced or burnt away, then you don't mind if you want to open up. That kind of freedom which you can breathe in that state of that kind of uh, freedom, natural freedom you feel, all your tensions, all your worries, all your anxieties go when you reduce the kleshas to their dagda bija avastha. You burnt all the seeds, so now they will not come. The troubles or the sorrows that used to pop up in your mind, they will be incapable of sprouting because they have been destroyed. So vichinna avastha, the repressed state or the suppressed state, and the fourth state, that is udara, perfectly easily expressed. Good or bad, they are now simply out of control. If the bad kleshas are there, they will manifest the bad things and then they will misguide people. And if they are good, then you can follow the good path. So Tanu Karana, the first two, Prasupta and Tanu, we discussed. In the next class, we will discuss the Vichinna, the repressed or the suppressed state, and then Udara, which is without any obstacle, freely expressed. So that we will study in the next class. So let me see if there are some questions. Yeah, what are the different methods of Swadhyaya? Oh, there are many methods of Swadhyaya. As I said, self-study can be done in many ways. The first main way is discrimination. Try to find out what is temporary, what is permanent, which personality or which kosha of mine is more important, which kosha I have to cultivate. So all these things are Swadhyaya, trying to study the human possibilities in depth. So Swadhyaya can be done through brain, Jnana Yoga, can be done through bhakti, by just praying and praying and praying to a higher reality, to make them, to cling to them so that one day your ignorance, avidya will go. That is the main reason why we pray. The prayer can be effective and that prayer can reduce uh, the effect of the kleshas very easily. We think it is a miracle, but it's not a miracle. It's just our own prayers that were answered, either in this life or in previous life. Some people seem to get that grace and the divine intervention very easily. And then we feel that we have done so much sadhana, but he has practically done nothing and he gets. But you have to account for the previous life, because these kleshas, they don't die unless you burn them, which is very rare. Unless you burn the seeds of our future samskaras, there is no joy. Otherwise, we will have joy, but that is partial. So we will see the question now. The question which says, These are the different methods of Swadhyaya: Ishvara Pranidhana, prayer; Bhakti Yoga, doing karma yoga in a detached way. These are the various Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya does not mean just a study only. It is a transformative technique based on our study. We have studied the Vedanta, we want it to transform our personality. So that is how these things can be addressed. This is Swadhyaya. Now we have, it seems the Dagda Bija is the best way to eliminate Klesha. Yes. So that Klesha, that Dagda Bija is the best way, but it is very difficult to burn. So we will discuss it in the next class. No doubt Dagda Bija, the seeds if you burn, but how many seeds or kleshas can you burn? There is a limit to what you can do, achieve in this life. Then you have to do the next best thing. See that the samskaras have become so fine, or tanukarana is so effective that you are practically, you can say, safe people, safe personalities, because you will not commit these mistakes. You are not in the control of your kleshas. You are controlling your kleshas through your willpower, and you know what is right and wrong, and you always do the right at the cost of doing the wrong. And that is how spiritual progress is made. So, in ordinary life, in many of our lives, if you see in ordinary life, many of our like most of the vrittis they express without any obstruction, because uh, there are certain clear things that we have aspired for and we know we want. So these things do not interfere, especially if it is a good cause. So, like for example, hunger. You don't have to think of hunger. The moment your body feels hungry, it will go after food. Then we have love for music. They are freely expressed. You can't say now between 3 to 4 you'll sing. Suppose you are not in a mood, you can't sing. It is the free expression, some kind of freedom. That's why they say those who have this faculty of creative arts, they are practically, their samskaras are not strong. Otherwise, they will not get time for all these things. The love of music, the love of painting, the love of finer arts, these come to a person who is free from inside. If there is too much of guilt, too much of problem, then too much of anxiety and worry, you will not, even though you are a good painter, you will not enjoy your own painting. It has to come out of freedom. So that is one of the ways how the positive side of Udara Vritti. So we'll come to that in the next class. So let me see if there is one more. One wonders how life is such struggle even with Thakur blessings. See, it is not a struggle, it can be a great joy. If you see Holy Mother, her life was full of joy. She says there was a picture of joy. So when we have Thakur's blessings or Sri Ramakrishna's or any Ishta's blessings, we have to use our strong imagination to find out how, in spite of struggle, we can retain our mental balance and joy. If you see, unless you see the lives of these great uh, prophets, the Divine Mother, the Holy Mother, and other great women, how steadfastly they did their sadhana, and how they did not allow their struggle to look like a struggle. They were struggling, but they didn't make a big fuss because they had faith in the Lord. They knew that if I persist in my sadhana, a day will come when all this suffering will go away. So Atyantika Dukkha Nivrutti will definitely take place, and Paramasukha Prapti, the enjoyment of the divine bliss, also is within us. So both the kingdom of hell or the kingdom of heaven, both are within us. If we want to, if we succumb to these kleshas, then we can make our own life a hell. In the same place, if you get rid of the kleshas, the same place or the same poetry or the same prose, it will give you full of joy. But if you are in a bad mood, you give them one of the good literature also, and some wonderful painting, they will not be able to appreciate it. That's why you find that some people don't appreciate music, don't appreciate fine art, because their minds are very gross. They can't enjoy higher kinds of uh, the kleshas are so strong that they get stuck at the lower level. They cannot freely express themselves through the medium, through such fine arts and music and other things, because they are not freely expressed. They are restricted. Something, as it were, does not allow them to be happy, allow them to be free, allow them to be uh, spontaneously seeing the infinite in the finite. These artists, what they do, the great painters, they try to search for infinity in the finite universe, but they do it unconsciously. Spirituality helps you to do it in a conscious way. So there are no more questions. I'll take your leave. Yes. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.